Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Udikang. It's a show, as you know, where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and the challenges and triumphs within those fields. It's inspiring, informative, and very much inquisitive. As usual, I often have some guests talk about some items that are on the periphery of project management and business analysis, like my guest today. My guest today is an avid public speaker. He has had a myriad of roles in the past, including that of VP Sales and Marketing for an insurance company in Canada, the United States, Indonesia, and Thailand. In his retirement, he is anything but retired, taking on roles in that well-known public speaking organization called Toastmasters. He's also VP membership for Dynamically Speaking Toastmasters Club in Lethbridge, Alberta. So please help me welcome to today's show, joining us all the way from Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, Ron MacTavish. Welcome, Ron.
Nice to be here, Marcus. Welcome to you.
Thank you. Now, I thought I would start off by asking, perhaps the obvious, why did you want to take an interest in public speaking?
Easy question to answer for me. I won an award in my first year as the best salesperson in my company in Canada. And the following year, I was asked to give a speech along with two other high-profile salespeople from my organization, veterans of the insurance field. And I gave this speech at an international convention. And when that happened, I sat down between these two veteran speakers and said to myself, that was a rush. And I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I better get good at it, which led me to Toastmasters.
Now, looking back at your time in Toastmasters, what are some benefits to becoming a Toastmaster member, would you say?
Well, I think most people who join Toastmasters join because they want to give presentations better, whether it's at work or whether it's in some community organization that they're involved in. And that was my reason. But it didn't take me long to realize, Margaret, especially as my career moved more and more towards management, that I was learning things that would help me in my management career much more than they would, you would think from the public speaking perspective. For example, I learned how to run business meetings. I'm sure, Marcus, in your time, you've sat in some business meetings that were dull, where people didn't pay attention to time, where things got off topic. Toastmasters teaches you how to run a meeting in a professional manner, and that just helped me immeasurably when I fully went into management, because I was running those kinds of meetings 2, 3, 4 times a week, and so I had to be good at it. The other thing is, in Toastmasters, when a person gives a speech, they get feedback. They're evaluated by a person who usually has more experience than they do. And when you're evaluating a person's speech in Toastmasters, you learn how to point out the things that speaker has done well, but also to gently suggest some ways that they might improve their performance. And that technique of learning how to do it in Toastmasters in a subtle way, again, helped me immeasurably in management.
Splendid. So now you initially spent about 10 years in Toastmasters, then
Right.
You left to raise a family and returned to Toastmasters years later when you retired.
Not quite, Marcus.
Not quite. Okay.
I left Toastmasters after 10 years because my career was just so busy.
Okay.
I was flying around the country, often in the air, thousands of miles away from my home. So I just couldn't commit to the club. So after 10 years, I stopped. And when I retired 17 years later, I went back. And my reason for going back was because I thought that I owed so much to that organization because how it helped me immeasurably in my career in many different ways. And So since retiring, I've been back for another 14 years.
Wow. Now, what are some of the changes that you've seen happen in Toastmasters over so many years in the organization?
Oh, in the organization, it's real easy to point out, and it kind of parallels what I did in my career. The hotbed of Toastmasters when I joined uh, in the in the 1980s was North America, and it was the center of the Toastmaster world. And from the perspective of the Toastmasters International Headquarters, which is in Denver, that's still the case. But where the Toastmaster growth has happened in the world is in the Pacific Rim, in South Asia, in Eastern Europe, Africa, all the places where you have rapidly developing economies. And it's primarily because English is the language of business. And if you speak two or three languages of the country that you might come from, which is often the case in India, for example, you really still have to make your case in business in English. And Toastmasters helps you so much in that way.
Now, maybe apart from the English side of Toastmasters, maybe you got to answer the question, why should we even be interested in learning public speaking? You've answered a bit about that, but I want to add on to that question also leadership skills. Why do we need leadership skills?
Well, you don't if you don't want to advance in your career. but if you're ambitious and if you want to be your best self, obviously you want to advance. But that just isn't in your career. You could be very involved in a volunteer organization like Girl Guides, for instance. If you want to advance in that organization, you have to become a better leader. And the great thing about Toastmasters, it teaches you communication skills, but there's also all sorts of opportunities to take on leadership roles. And when you do that, you get the benefits of both parts of that Toastmaster equation.
Hmm. Now, you've seen many changes in Toastmasters, and one of those big changes we've seen is that of COVID. And that has affected membership levels immensely, and not in a positive way, in a negative way. Many members have left the club because, well, for a variety of reasons. Maybe they didn't want to do online meetings and so on. But what are some ways that we can build Toastmaster clubs to be attractive, to be active, and to be enduring to its members during COVID?
Well, Marcus, that's a bit of a leading question because that's not my Toastmaster experience. And Toastmasters is like a lot of business companies and organizations that you'll see around the world. When COVID struck and you had to meet online through Zoom or other forums, a lot of people weren't prepared to make the changes to be successful in that environment. And so you're right in saying there's probably more Toastmaster districts or organizations that have suffered from that. And it's also because, let's face it, there's just way more demands during a pandemic in terms of looking after your kids, looking after your job, balancing jobs. If you've got two members of a household working, maybe one has to work part-time hours. There's a lot of things going on. But you know from business that there have been some companies that have been remarkably successful during COVID. Their share value has gone up. They're reaching more customers than ever before. And in the club that I belong to, before the pandemic hit, our club was a typical great Toastmaster club. By great, that means you have to be a President's Distinguished Club and have somewhere over 20 members. For years, at least a dozen years, we were a President's Distinguished Club in Lethbridge, which had about 25 members on average. Now we're again, the last 2 years, a President's Distinguished Club, but now we have over 50 members. And I can assure you that's not the experience of most Toastmaster clubs. But there was inherent opportunities with the arrival of Zoom. And there's, from my perspective, and obviously from the perspective of our club, way more advantages now to be a Toastmaster and working kind of in an international environment than there ever was before. You can do so many more things. It just gives you capabilities that you could have never had before with just the in-person environment.
So dynamically speaking really is one of those few exceptions where they've used Zoom to their advantage to gain an increase of members rather than lose members. So it certainly can be done. Talking about dynamically speaking, Toastmasters Club that you're a member of, they run a really well-structured mentor program. And part of becoming a great Toastmaster is to go through a mentor program. Maybe you can give us a bit of an idea of what your mentor program encompasses.
Well, with most Toastmastering mentoring programs, it's designed to help you get through the first few steps of being a Toastmaster, maybe your first 6 months into the program. And of course, that's what our club is built around too. And, you know, in the traditional sense, Marcus, when you talk about mentoring, you look at the classic examples, Plato being mentored by Socrates, you know, a wise man working with a young student, or if you go to the Indian tradition, you have the guru who's living in the forest, and seated around the guru are 10 or 20 disciples, and you get this one-on-one training. And that's the classic type of training that you would have gotten in Toastmasters for decades and decades, and it's what I was brought up in. Now, not all Toastmasters clubs have advanced mentoring programs, but in our pre-Zoom environment, we had that. We had 4 people in our club, very senior, most of them DTMs, Distinguished Toastmasters, the highest education designation that a Toastmaster can earn. They were helping the new people in the club. But with our rapid growth, we had to change our mentoring model. And now, instead of having 4 people involved in our club, we've got about 20 people involved in mentoring. And we've gone to having the classic one-on-one, to having a senior mentor working with kind of an associate or junior mentor working with the new people in your club. And now we've evolved to have pods where you have a senior mentor with an associate mentor and maybe 4, 5, or 6 other newer people in the program. And again, this is where Zoom really helps you. You can get together a 6-person group on Zoom, whereas before you're always meeting in a restaurant somewhere or meeting in somebody's office. Now it's just way easier to facilitate.
Now, why, let me ask the obvious question, why would anyone need to be mentored in the first place? Why should I say, what kind of value does mentoring bring to a member?
The obvious example is you can get to where you want to go a lot faster if you've got somebody who's got some relevant experience to help you do that. But I mean, that sounds formulaic. And what you really have to have, though, is a person or people who are mentors who are genuinely concerned about that person's growth. And from our perspective at our club, yes, we pay a lot of attention to what the goals are that the person has in a Toastmaster setting. But Toastmasters is about practicing for life. And so what are the goals that that person has for their life? And how can we get mentors who have some similar values or similar experience aligned with them? And one of the, I think, the hallmarks of our club is we spend a lot of time interviewing the new members coming into our club before we assign them to a mentor or a mentoring group.
Now, part of being mentored means that you're going to, the club is going to help you grow, but you can also help the club grow by owning the club. Maybe you can explain to us a bit about what owning a club means. I mean, what does,
well, you just got to buy into it. You've got to buy into it. And I'll give you an example. We're going through club officer training right now in our district, and we've sent out surveys. What is it that you want to know, or what is it you want to learn? And they all want to learn how you can attract more members to your Toastmaster club. We attract members to our Toastmaster club through our mentoring program. And most of the people who become a member of our club are referred by other people in our club.
Hmm.
And they've all gone through our mentoring program. So when they go out and talk to somebody, they're usually talking to a coworker or they're talking to a friend, and they say, this club I'm at, man, their meetings are awesome. They're fun. You learn things. And then they have this amazing mentoring program that really helps you speed up. And I can tell you, and they'll give these personal endorsements of how they've learned so much in a short time. So the mentoring that we do in our program, in our Toastmaster Club, really helps attract the kind of members that do well in our environment.
Now, part of the attraction to dynamically speaking is that you've got all some subgroups. For example, you've got what they call a DTM mastermind group. You've got an MBA group. Maybe you can tell us a bit about what these groups do.
Because we're a large club and because we're observant, meaning we know what the people who are coming to our club, where they're coming from, what their goals are, we've been able to put together different groups of experienced people and inexperienced people. So, for example, your MBA group that you made reference to, we have 3 people in our club who've recently finished MBAs, and we have 3 people who currently are working on MBAs. So seemed like a natural to hold a meeting or two with these people so that they could talk to each other about their common experience. And for the new people who are currently in the MBA program, I think it helped them a lot to answer those questions. And of course, when you've experienced something and you feel good about your experience as a mentor, in this case, the MBA graduates, I think they felt good helping somebody else too. And that's part of being a mentor. You have to be altruistic and share your experience so that somebody gains from some of the things you've learned along the way.
Now, one thing that I find fascinating about dynamically speaking is you talked about the growth where you went from very few people to many people since you went on Zoom. Maybe you can give us an idea of what some of the steps that you took. So, for example, I know that you did a SWOT analysis. Maybe you can give us an idea of how that SWOT
Sure.
analysis helped grow your club.
When you say very few people, we were never very few. We were always good in the old system of Toastmasters. It's just now we have twice as many members and we're twice as good. But this comes back to my business experience, really. I mean, every year I was used to doing annual plans, often with SWOT analysis. And in Toastmasters, they ask clubs to do a SWOT analysis, and many clubs do not. In our club we've always taken it seriously. So, for example, this year you do a SWOT analysis. Our executive, 7-person executive, did the SWOT analysis. We did we asked everybody to go and do their own analysis. They did. We gathered together in another meeting and we collated all the data. Then that data, in this case, was sent to me, and I kind of fleshed out a 1-page plan from that. But here's one of the key things that we did this year, which is just remarkable. It turned out to be remarkable. It was almost sort of an ad hoc addition to what we were doing. But we asked 4 of our newest members to do the SWOT analysis too. People who'd been Toastmasters for a year or less. And I think you know this, Marcus, like our club ostensibly is in Lethbridge, but we work in 14 communities across Alberta, from Fort McMurray in the north to Raymond in the south, and we have members in 5 countries, 3 continents, lots of different time zones, different Canadian provinces. We asked 4 people from that disparate environment, less than a year, to contribute. So, for instance, we had a member in Calgary, we had a member in Ensenada, Mexico, we had a member in Red Deer, Alberta, we had a member in Ontario. Add to that all, and it was really good to get the perspective of newer people. And it made me think back to my executive career, and in all the SWOT analysis that I did in corporate settings, when I'm reporting to the president of the division type of thing, or the president of the U.S. operations or whatever, we never included anybody but senior executives. And having the insight of fresh new people really helped us develop a different set of goals for our year.
Splendid. Now, I want to ask also, dynamically speaking, is the one of only 2 Canadian clubs that are on the top 50 list of Toastmaster clubs in the world. How would you, or any recommendations for any other clubs who would like to be on that list?
Well, the first thing is, this is from business and this is from Toastmasters. Don't compare yourself to your neighbors because you develop a myopic viewpoint when you do that. If you're an ordinary club in an ordinary Toastmaster district around the world, first off, start by comparing yourself to the best clubs in your district. Why are they succeeding and what is it that they're doing that you're not doing? But, and again, this is where Zoom comes in. Look at the metrics. If you're in a worldwide organization like Toastmasters, spend some time learning about clubs that are succeeding in district Toastmasters areas around the world. Like, for instance, we talked about how Toastmasters has grown in the Pacific Rim. Well, I spend a lot of time looking at the clubs in Singapore, looking at the clubs in India, looking at the clubs in China, in Sri Lanka, where they have fabulous Toastmaster membership. What is it that they're doing that we're not doing?
That's spectacular. And I probably should ask you also any recommendations on how one can join a Toastmaster club.
Well, I mean, it's as simple as Google. Just go into Google and find Toastmaster clubs in your area. And what I would encourage somebody who's new, like, obviously you're the inquisitive business analyst, so you've got a network of people that why would they want to join? Hopefully we've given them some reasons. Not all Toastmaster clubs are the same. Look for a club that's President's Distinguished, that club that I mentioned before, because you know they'll have some experienced people there and you know they've got a track record of success. Now, not many people will do that, but go and do that. And also go to a meeting or two of them and see if you fit in that type of an environment.
Now, I also want to ask you about the Accredited Speaker program. And this is a specialized program in Toastmasters. Maybe you can elaborate on that a bit.
Well, I can talk about that because I've worked with some accredited speakers and people who, there's probably under 100 accredited speakers in the Toastmaster world. That designation goes to people who have earned the right to that designation through a jury of their eventual peers, people who are already accredited speakers. And it's the highest designation that Toastmaster awards for professional speakers. Now, most people who are in Toastmasters are not professional speakers, but there are many who are professional speakers. And you know, I think, that in our club, we have an accredited speaker in our club, Freddie Doctor. And Freddie worked very hard to get that accredited speaker designation. Of course, she's one of the top Toastmaster speakers in the world.
Splendid. I want to thank you very much, Ron, for coming on the show. And perhaps one last question. If anyone in the audience wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Well, the simplest way is to go to Dynamically Speaking Toastmasters, look that up on your Google search engine or whatever, and just come to a meeting. You'll get directions and you can come that way. And since you're talking about Dynamically Speaking and our club in particular, there's a lot of great Toastmaster clubs around the world. I know your expansive podcast network, Marcus, touches people in the Mideast and the Pacific Rim and all over North America. And some of your podcast subscribers are people who are already Toastmasters, but there's many who aren't. And so my flip back to them is, everybody's heard of Toastmasters and everybody knows they should perhaps invest in that at some time. The common experience of people who come and really get good at Toastmasters is they say, I should have done this 5 years before or 10 years before. Why didn't I do this when I got out of university? Go now. Never a
Splendid.
better time to be a Toastmaster.
Splendid and brilliant way to end the interview. I want to thank you again, Ron, for coming on. It's been a wholehearted, good 25 minutes of a lot of information. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Marcus.
All right, take care. And now a word from our sponsors. The Lewis Institute provides an enterprise project management program that does more than just train PMs. It helps support them from the CEO level on down. These courses help certify project leaders and prepare them to pass the PMP exam.